The village of Abadil was not usually a noisy place. Most days, you could hear the soft rustle of the wind brushing through the tall palm trees or the steady clucking of chickens wandering across dusty courtyards. But today was different. Today, the air was heavy with the sound of voices, footsteps, and the clanging of pots. The burial of Alhaji Dinladi, one of the most important men in the community, had drawn people from near and far. Alhaji Dinladi had been many things: a father, a businessman, and a leader. People often said he had a way of solving problems without raising his voice, and his generosity was something everyone respected. He had helped rebuild the village school after a storm destroyed it, and he was known to pay hospital bills for families in need. But now he was gone, and the community had come together to honor him one last time. The compound was buzzing with activity. Women were stirring pots of soup and frying meat in the outdoor kitchen. Men gathered under a canopy, talking in low tones about Alhaji's achievements and how his death had left a hole in the village. Children darted between legs, playing games and laughing, unaware of the somber reason for the gathering. In the middle of it all was Mama Halima, Alhaji's widow. She moved from one group to another, making sure everything was going smoothly. Her face was tired, but she still managed to thank every guest who came to pay their respects. Beside her stood her two sons, Idris and Ahmed. They had both returned from the city for the burial, but the tension between them was obvious. They barely spoke to each other, and when they did, their words were sharp. "You've been away for years, Idris. Don't act like you suddenly care about the family," Ahmed muttered as he folded his arms. Idris, who was taller and had an air of confidence, didn't flinch. "I'm here now, aren't I? Maybe you should focus on doing what's best for the family instead of talking so much." Mama Halima shot them both a stern look. "This is not the time for arguments. Today we honor your father. Put your differences aside." The brothers fell silent, but the bitterness lingered in the air. Everyone in the village knew about their rivalry. Since Alhaji's passing, there had been whispers about who would take over his business and manage his properties. Idris, the older son, was a lawyer in Lagos and hadn't been home in years. Ahmed, on the other hand, had stayed in the village and worked closely with their father. Each believed they were the rightful heir to their father's legacy. Meanwhile, in the corner of the compound, Coco, the family's dog, sat quietly under a tree. Coco had been a part of the family for years, ever since Alhaji had brought him home as a puppy. He was usually a calm dog, content to lounge in the shade or follow Mama Halima around. But today, Coco seemed restless. His ears twitched, and his eyes darted toward the outdoor kitchen where the burial rice was being prepared. The burial rice was the most important part of the feast. It was a tradition in Abadil to serve a special rice dish at burials, cooked with fragrant spices and served to all the guests. Yinka, the head chef, was in charge of preparing it, and he took his job very seriously. "This rice has to be perfect," Yinka said to his assistants as he stirred the massive pot. "People will talk about this meal for weeks. We can't afford any mistakes." As Yinka worked, Coco wandered closer to the kitchen. The dog began sniffing the air, his nose twitching as he moved toward the pot of rice. Suddenly he started barking, loud and sharp. "Coco, get out of here," one of the kitchen assistants shouted, waving a ladle at him. "Go away." But Coco didn't move. He barked again, louder this time, his eyes fixed on the pot. Yinka frowned and looked over. "What's wrong with that dog?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Mama Halima, hearing the commotion, walked over. She saw Coco barking and shook her head. "He's grieving. He hasn't been himself since Alhaji passed. Just ignore him." The assistants laughed nervously and went back to their work. Coco, however, refused to leave. He paced around the pot, barking and growling as if he could sense something was wrong. But no one paid him any attention. As the day went on, more guests arrived, and the compound became even busier. The elders of the village gathered under a special canopy, discussing Alhaji's contributions to the community. They spoke of the new water well he had funded and the scholarships he had given to promising students. "His sons have big shoes to fill," one of the elders said, glancing toward Idris and Ahmed. "I hope they don't let us down." Idris overheard the comment and smiled slightly, while Ahmed frowned and looked away. The brothers' rivalry was becoming harder to hide. By late afternoon, the rice was ready. Yinka and his team carried the massive pot to the serving table, and the aroma filled the air, drawing compliments from the guests. "Ah, this rice will be the talk of the village," one man said, clapping Yinka on the back. Coco followed closely, still barking. He sat a few feet away from the table, his tail wagging nervously as he let out a low growl. "What's his problem?" Yinka muttered. "Maybe he's hungry. Someone give him a bone to chew on." Mama Halima walked over again. "Leave him," she said. "He's just upset because of the noise. He'll settle down soon." But Coco didn't settle down. As the guests began lining up to be served, the dog's barking grew more frantic. Still, no one took him seriously. The focus was on the food and the ceremony, and Coco's actions were dismissed as nothing more than a distraction. The compound buzzed with activity as guests lined up to be served the burial rice. The tantalizing aroma hung in the air, drawing everyone's attention to the serving table. The children, who had been playing noisily, now stood quietly, their eyes wide with anticipation. Even the elders, who had been deep in conversation, paused to comment on how delicious the rice smelled. Coco, however, had not stopped barking. He had moved closer to the serving table, pacing back and forth with a low growl rumbling in his throat. His eyes darted toward the pot of rice as if it were a threat only he could see. Some guests chuckled, pointing at the dog and joking about how he wanted his share of the food. "This dog really loves rice," one man said, laughing. "Coco, go away. Stop embarrassing the family," Mama Halima scolded, her voice tinged with irritation. But Coco didn't leave. He let out another loud bark, his tail stiff and his ears flattened. It was clear he wasn't going to stop. Idris, standing near the serving table, frowned and looked at the dog. "There's something odd about this," he muttered. Ahmed, who had been trying to avoid his brother all day, overheard and scoffed. "Don't start, Idris. It's just a dog. He probably smells the food and wants some." "Maybe," Idris replied, his eyes still on Coco. "But he's not usually like this. He's acting different." Ahmed rolled his eyes. "Are you a dog expert now? Stop trying to create drama where there is none." Before Idris could respond, Yinka, the head chef, stepped forward with a proud smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, the rice is ready. Please enjoy yourselves. This is a special day to honor Alhaji Dinladi." A cheer went up from the crowd as the serving began. Plates piled high with steaming rice and meat were handed out to the guests. The chatter grew louder as people dug into their meals, praising the flavors and complimenting Yinka on his cooking. Coco's barking grew more frantic. He jumped closer to the table, his claws scraping against the ground as if trying to pull attention back to the rice. One of the kitchen assistants swatted at him with a broom. "Get out of here, Coco. You're disturbing everyone." Mama Halima's patience finally snapped. "Ahmed, take that dog away from here. Put him in the back so we can have peace." Ahmed muttered under his breath but grabbed Coco by the collar. The dog resisted, planting his paws firmly on the ground and growling as Ahmed dragged him toward the house. The guests laughed again, the tension dissipating as they focused on their food. But Idris couldn't shake the unease that had settled in his chest. He glanced at the pot of rice, then at the retreating figure of Coco. Something about the dog's behavior gnawed at him, but he couldn't put it into words. As the serving continued, Yinka stood to the side, watching the guests enjoy the meal with a satisfied grin. He had worked hard on the rice, and their compliments were a reward for his efforts. But hunger had been gnawing at him all day. He hadn't eaten since morning, and the sight of the rice was too tempting to resist. "Let me taste it myself," he said to one of his assistants, laughing. "After all, I cooked it. I deserve to enjoy it too." Yinka grabbed a plate and scooped a generous serving of rice. He sat on a stool near the kitchen and took a large spoonful, savoring the flavors. "Perfect," he muttered to himself, nodding in approval. But as he reached for another bite, his expression changed. His hand froze, and the spoon clattered to the ground. Yinka's eyes widened as he clutched his stomach. His breathing suddenly labored. He tried to call out, but no words came. Instead, a choked gasp escaped his lips as he doubled over, collapsing onto the ground. The sound of the spoon hitting the ground caught the attention of a nearby assistant. She turned and screamed when she saw Yinka writhing on the floor. "Yinka! Yinka, what's wrong?" she cried, rushing to his side. Her screams quickly drew the attention of the crowd. Guests dropped their plates and rushed toward the commotion. Mama Halima pushed her way through the crowd, her heart pounding. "What happened?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I don't know," the assistant wailed. "He was eating the rice, and then he just collapsed." Idris's head snapped up at the mention of the rice. He turned to Ahmed, who had just returned after locking Coco in the backyard. "Did you hear that?" Idris said urgently. "It's the rice. Something is wrong with it." Ahmed frowned. "Stop jumping to conclusions. Maybe he's sick." But Idris wasn't convinced. "Yinka ate the rice, Ahmed. The same rice Coco wouldn't stop barking at. This isn't a coincidence." Before Ahmed could respond, Kahind, a local nurse who had come to pay her respects, pushed through the crowd. She knelt beside Yinka, checking his pulse and examining his face. "Everyone, move back. Give him space," she ordered, her voice firm. "He's in shock. Someone get me water. Now." A young boy dashed off to fetch water, and Kahind turned to Mama Halima. "What did he eat?" "The rice," Mama Halima whispered, her face pale. "He was eating the burial rice." Kahind's eyes widened, and she stood abruptly. "Nobody eats the rice. Stop serving it immediately," she shouted, her voice carrying over the crowd. Panic erupted as guests dropped their plates and stepped away from the serving table. Some began to murmur in fear, while others looked accusingly at the kitchen staff. "Who cooked this rice?" an elder demanded, his voice rising above the chaos. "How could this happen at a burial?" "We did everything right," one of the assistants cried, tears streaming down her face. "We followed all the instructions. It's not our fault." Idris stepped forward, his voice steady but tense. "We need to find out what went wrong. This isn't about blame right now. It's about keeping everyone safe." Ahmed folded his arms, his face set in a scowl. "So now you're the hero, Idris? This is why you came back, to show off?" "Enough, Ahmed," Mama Halima snapped. "This is not the time for your childish arguments. People could die." Ahmed fell silent, but his glare didn't soften. Idris ignored him and turned to Kahind. "What do we do now?" Kahind rubbed her temples, her mind racing. "We need to find out what's in that rice," she said. "But until we know, no one else can eat it. We have to warn everyone." Mama Halima nodded and turned to one of the kitchen assistants. "Go and tell the rest of the guests to stop eating immediately. Take away all the plates." The assistant hurried off, and the remaining guests watched anxiously as Kahind continued to tend to Yinka. The once lively compound was now eerily quiet, the air heavy with fear and uncertainty. Coco's barks echoed faintly from the backyard, a haunting reminder of the warning everyone had ignored. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the compound. The chatter had died down, replaced by the hum of nervous whispers. People gathered in small clusters, their faces tense as they avoided the pot of rice like it was a ticking bomb. Coco's barking in the backyard was the only sound cutting through the uneasy silence. Idris stood near the serving table, staring at the pot of rice. His arms were crossed, and his jaw was tight. Ahmed leaned against a wall a few feet away, still scowling, his fingers drumming against his folded arms. Mama Halima sat on a stool, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her face looked older, like the weight of the day had added years to her. "We can't just stand here," Idris finally said, breaking the silence. "We need answers. Someone needs to look into that rice." "And what do you think we'll find?" Ahmed snapped. "Poison? Magic? You think someone cursed the food?" Idris shot him a glare. "This isn't a joke, Ahmed. Someone could have died." Yinka is lucky he's still breathing. Lucky? Ahmed scoffed, his voice rising. He's not lucky. He's just weak. Maybe he couldn't handle spicy food. Mama Halima stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the ground. Both of you, enough, she snapped, her voice cutting through the tension. This is not the time for your childish bickering. Do you think your father would be proud of this? Both brothers fell silent, avoiding her gaze. Mama Halima's voice softened, but it was still firm. We are facing something serious. If this was an accident, we need to find out how it happened. And if it wasn't, she trailed off, her lips pressing into a thin line. We need to know the truth. Kahind, the nurse, approached the group, her expression grim. She had spent the last hour tending to Yinka, who was now lying on a makeshift bed in one of the rooms. How is he? Mama Halima asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kahind sighed. He's stable for now, but he's weak. I gave him something to calm his stomach, but he needs proper care. I still don't know what caused this. Did anyone eat the rice before him? Idris shook his head. Not that I saw. He was the first. Then we're lucky, Kahind said. If more people had eaten, this could have been much worse. The weight of her words hung in the air. Mama Halima's hands trembled, and she quickly clasped them together to steady herself. Idris glanced at her and then back at Kahind. What do we do now? Idris asked. We can't just assume it's over. Kahind hesitated, then nodded. The rice needs to be tested. I can't do much without proper equipment. But if there's anything suspicious in it, we'll find out. Test it, Ahmed scoffed. And how are you going to do that? Take it to the city? That could take days. What do we tell people in the meantime? That we don't know if they're safe. What would you rather we do? Idris shot back. Ignore it and hope for the best? Before Ahmed could respond, one of the kitchen assistants stepped forward, her face pale. There's something you should know, she said, her voice shaking. Earlier, when we were preparing the rice, Waisiu, he brought a package. Mama Halima frowned. What kind of package? The assistant wrung her hands nervously. He said it was a special spice. He said it would make the rice taste better, that it was a gift to honor Al-Haji. Her voice trailed off as the implications of her words sank in. And you used it? Idris asked, his tone sharp. The assistant nodded, tears streaming down her face. We didn't think anything of it. He said it was safe. Where is Waisiu? Ahmed demanded, his voice rising. Where is he now? The assistant shook her head. I don't know. He left before the rice was served. He said he had to attend to something urgent. Idris's fists clenched at his sides. Convenient timing, isn't it? He muttered. Mama Halima turned to one of the young men standing nearby. Find Waisiu, she said firmly. Bring him back here. Now. The young man nodded and hurried off, gathering a few others to help him search. The tension in the compound grew thicker, the murmurs of the crowd growing louder as they began to piece together what was happening. This can't be an accident, Idris said quietly, turning to Kahind. Someone planned this. Kahind nodded, her expression serious. It's starting to look that way, but we can't jump to conclusions until we've spoken to Waisiu. He might have answers, or he might run, Ahmed muttered. If he hasn't already. Idris glared at him. If you have nothing useful to say, keep quiet. Ahmed took a step closer, his voice low but heated. You think you know everything, don't you? You come back here after years of being away, and suddenly you're the one in charge. Stop it. Both of you. Mama Halima snapped. This is not about you. This is about your father's legacy, about our family. If you can't work together, then stay out of the way. Both brothers fell silent, their tempers simmering but held in check by their mother's stern gaze. The atmosphere in the compound was suffocating, the once celebratory mood now replaced by fear and suspicion. As the search for Waisiu continued, Idris and Kahind began examining the pot of rice. Kahind carefully scooped a small amount into a bowl, her movements deliberate. What are you looking for? Idris asked, watching her closely. Anything unusual, she replied. A strange smell, a foreign object, anything that doesn't belong. Idris nodded, though he felt a growing frustration. They were grasping at straws, and time was slipping away. The longer they waited, the more the tension in the compound would grow. Just then, the search party returned, dragging Waisiu with them. His shirt was wrinkled, and his face was a mask of panic. He stumbled as they pushed him forward, his eyes darting nervously between the angry faces surrounding him. Waisiu, Mama Halima said, her voice cold and steady. Explain yourself. What did you put in the rice? Waisiu's hands shot up defensively. Nothing. I didn't do anything, he cried. It was just a spice, I swear. It was supposed to make the rice taste better. Where did you get it? Kahind demanded, stepping closer. Waisiu hesitated, his eyes flicking to the ground. A friend gave it to me. He said it was special, that it would impress everyone. Who is this friend? Idris asked, his voice sharp. Waisiu stammered, his words tumbling over each other. I don't know his real name. He's just someone I met in the market. He sells spices. I didn't know this would happen. You didn't think? Ahmed barked, his voice dripping with anger. You didn't think to check? To ask questions? Do you have any idea what you've done? I'm sorry, Waisiu cried, his voice breaking. I didn't mean for this to happen. Please, believe me. The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs growing louder. It was clear that many didn't believe Waisiu's story. The tension was like a coiled spring, ready to snap at any moment. Mama Halima raised her hand, calling for silence. Waisiu, she said, her voice firm but controlled. Until we know the truth, you will stay here. If you try to run, you will answer to the elders. Do you understand? Waisiu nodded quickly, his head bobbing like a puppet's. Yes, I understand. The compound was quieter now, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that made your heart race, where every sound seemed louder than it was. People stood in small groups, whispering nervously. All eyes kept darting toward the serving table, the pot of rice untouched and sitting like a silent witness to the chaos it had caused. Waisiu sat on the ground, his head in his hands, surrounded by a few of the younger men who had been tasked with keeping him from running off. His shoulders shook as he muttered to himself, too quiet for anyone to hear clearly. Idris stood nearby, arms crossed and eyes sharp as he watched Waisiu. Mama Halima paced back and forth, her steps slow but heavy. Every now and then, she would stop, look toward Waisiu, and shake her head before continuing her pacing. Ahmed leaned against the wall, looking at his brother. Well, Idris, he said, his voice low but bitter, what do we do now? Are you going to solve this like one of your big city cases? Idris didn't respond immediately. His eyes didn't leave Waisiu. Finally, he spoke. What would you suggest, Ahmed? Pretend it's nothing? Let everyone go home and hope no one else collapses like Yinka? Ahmed's face darkened. Don't talk to me like I'm stupid. I know this is serious. But standing here staring at Waisiu isn't going to magically fix anything. It might, Idris replied, his voice calm but firm. Because Waisiu knows more than he's saying. And until we know everything, we can't move forward. And what if he's telling the truth? Ahmed shot back. What if he really didn't know the spice was bad? Are you going to keep him here forever? Before Idris could respond, Mama Halima's voice cut through their argument. Enough. Both of you. She stopped pacing and turned to face them. We will get to the bottom of this, but not by fighting each other. She turned to Waisiu, her eyes narrowing. Waisiu, look at me. Waisiu slowly raised his head, his face streaked with sweat and tears. Yes, Mama Halima, he whispered, his voice trembling. You said someone gave you this spice, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was an edge to it. You said it was a man in the market. Do you remember what he looked like? Anything about him? Think carefully before you answer. Waisiu sniffed and wiped his face with his sleeve. He was tall, he said slowly, his words hesitant. Not too tall, but taller than me. He had a beard. It wasn't very full. And he wore a green cap. Idris frowned. A green cap? That's it? You don't remember anything else? Waisiu shook his head quickly. I didn't think I needed to remember. He's just a spice seller. I've bought things from him before, and nothing bad ever happened. I didn't know this time would be different. Mama Halima's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at Idris. Does that help? Maybe, Idris said, though his tone was uncertain. He looked back at Wasiu. You're sure you've bought from him before? You're not mistaking him for someone else. I'm sure, Wasiu said. I always buy spices from the same place. It's cheaper than the big shops. He's always there, near the end of the market, by the old well. Idris nodded slowly. All right, that gives us something to work with. Tomorrow, I'll go to the market and find this man. Ahmed raised an eyebrow. And what if he's not there? What if he's already skipped town? People talk. Idris. By now, he might know something went wrong. Then I'll find someone who knows him, Idris said simply. Someone must know where he gets his spices. No one just disappears without leaving a trail. Kahin joined the group, her expression grim. Yinka is stable for now, she said. But we can't keep waiting. We need to figure out what was in that rice. If more people had eaten, she trailed off, shaking her head. We're lucky it wasn't worse. Mama Halima's shoulders sagged, and she sank back onto her stool. Lucky, she murmured, her voice heavy with exhaustion. If this was supposed to be luck, I don't want to imagine what bad luck would look like. Kahind placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll get through this, Mama Halima. We just need to stay focused. Idris glanced at the pot of rice, still sitting on the serving table. Do you think there's any way to test it here? He asked Kahind. Kahind hesitated. Not properly, she admitted. But we might be able to tell if there's something obvious. I can take a closer look, but I'll need gloves and something to scoop it with. We can't risk touching it directly. I'll get what you need, Mama Halima said. Standing up again. We need answers. I won't let this ruin my husband's memory. As Mama Halima walked away, Idris turned back to Wasiu. If you're lying about any of this, he said quietly, you'll regret it. Do you understand me? Wasiu's eyes widened, and he nodded frantically. I'm not lying, I swear. Please. I'm telling you everything I know. For your sake, I hope that's true, Idris said, his tone cold. The sun had barely risen the next morning when Idris prepared to leave for the market. The compound was quiet, but the tension from the day before still hung in the air. Mama Halima watched him from the doorway, her face lined with worry. Ahmed stood a few steps away, arms crossed, his expression a mix of annoyance and concern. Are you sure about this? Mama Halima asked softly, clutching her wrapper tightly around her shoulders. You don't know what you'll find there, Idris. This man could be dangerous. Idris adjusted the satchel slung over his shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. I have to try, Mama. We can't just sit here and wait for answers to come to us. Wasiu said the spice seller is always at the market. If he's there, I'll find him. Ahmed snorted. And if he's not, what then? Are you going to search every market in the state? This is a waste of time. Idris turned to his brother, his jaw tightening. If you have a better idea, Ahmed, now would be the time to share it. Ahmed opened his mouth to reply, but Mama Halima raised her hand, silencing him. Enough, both of you, she said firmly. Idris is trying to help. If this is what he thinks he needs to do, let him go. But be careful, my son. We can't afford to lose you too. Idris nodded, his resolve firm. I'll be careful, Mama. Promise. He turned and walked toward the gate, his steps steady and purposeful. Behind him, Ahmed shook his head and muttered under his breath. But he didn't follow. The market was already bustling with activity by the time Idris arrived. Vendors called out their wares, the air filled with the mingling smells of fresh produce, spices, and frying food. It was a familiar chaos, one that Idris had missed during his years in the city. But today he had no time to reminisce. He made his way toward the section of the market Wasiu had described, near the old well. His eyes scanned the stalls, searching for anyone who matched the description of the spice seller. A tall man with a patchy beard and a green cap. The noise of the market seemed louder than usual, making it harder to focus. Excuse me, Idris said to a woman selling vegetables. I'm looking for a spice seller. He's tall, has a beard, and usually wears a green cap. Do you know him? The woman shook her head. There are many spice sellers here. You'll have to be more specific. Idris sighed and moved on, asking the same question at several stalls. Most people gave him confused looks or vague answers. Just when he was starting to feel frustrated, an elderly man sitting by a pile of woven baskets called out to him. You're looking for the spice seller by the well, aren't you? The man said, his voice raspy but clear. Idris's heart jumped. He hurried over to the man. Yes, that's the one. Do you know where he is? The man nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing. I've seen him before, always hanging around here, selling his wares. But he hasn't been here today. Not yet. Anyway, do you know his name? Or where he comes from? Idris asked. The old man scratched his head. Can't say I know his name. But he's not from around here, that's for sure. Talks different, like someone from the northern parts. He's always got a bag full of spices, says they're special blends. Some people swear by them, but others, well, they don't trust him. Idris frowned. Why don't they trust him? The old man shrugged. People say he's too secretive. Doesn't tell anyone where he gets his spices. And once, someone got sick after using one of his mixes. But that was a long time ago. No proof it was his fault. Idris's mind raced. This had to be the man Waisiu had talked about. If he shows up, can you point him out to me? He asked. The old man nodded. I can do that, but you might have to wait a while. He comes and goes as he pleases. Idris glanced around, considering his options. He couldn't afford to wait all day, but this was the best lead he had. Thank you, he said. I'll stick around for a bit. Back at the compound, Kahind was busy examining the pot of rice. She had laid out a small table with gloves, spoons, and bowls, carefully scooping small portions of the rice to inspect. Mama Halima watched from a distance, her hands clasped tightly together. Do you see anything? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kahind shook her head. Nothing obvious yet. But that doesn't mean it's safe. There could be something mixed into the spices that we can't see with the naked eye. Mama Halima's shoulders slumped. This is all so strange. Why would anyone do this? What could they possibly gain from poisoning a pot of rice at a burial? Kahind paused, looking up at her. Sometimes people do terrible things for reasons that don't make sense to the rest of us. Could be jealousy, anger, or even a simple mistake. But we'll find out. We have to. At the market, Idris's patience was wearing thin. He had been waiting near the old well for over an hour, and there was still no sign of the spice seller. He was about to leave when he spotted a man walking toward the well, a large bag slung over his shoulder. The man was tall, with a patchy beard and a green cap. Idris's heart began to race. He stepped forward, blocking the man's path. Are you the spice seller? He asked, his voice steady but firm. The man stopped, his eyes narrowing. Who's asking? My name is Idris. I need to ask you some questions about the spices you sell. The man frowned. I don't have time for questions. If you want to buy something, fine. If not, step aside. Idris didn't move. Someone got sick after eating rice made with your spice blend. I need to know what's in it. The man's expression darkened. I don't know what you're talking about. My spices are safe. If someone got sick, it's not my fault. Then prove it, Idris said. Tell me what's in the mix you sold to Waisiu. Where do you get your ingredients? The man hesitated, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. I get them from different places. Farmers, traders. I mix them myself. There's nothing wrong with them. If that's true, then you have nothing to hide, Idris said. But if you don't tell me the truth, more people could get hurt. Do you really want that on your conscience? The man's jaw tightened. For a moment, it seemed like he might push past Idris and leave. But then he sighed and slung his bag to the ground. Fine, he muttered. I'll show you what's in the mix. But I'm telling you, it's not my fault if someone got sick. Idris nodded, his resolve firm. This was the break he had been waiting for. But as the spice seller opened his bag, Idris couldn't shake the feeling that the truth he was about to uncover might only deepen the mystery. The spice seller crouched down, rummaging through his bag as Idris watched him closely. The market noise seemed to fade into the background as Idris's focus narrowed on the man's every move. The seller's hands shook slightly as he pulled out several small sacks, each tied tightly with a piece of string. He set them on the ground, his eyes flickering nervously between Idris and the sacks. "This is everything," the spice seller muttered, his voice low. "These are the blends I sell. Nothing else." Idris crouched beside him, inspecting the sacks. He picked up one and loosened the string, revealing a mixture of dried herbs and spices. The scent was strong, earthy, and unfamiliar. He glanced at the spice seller. "Which one did you sell to Wasiu?" Idris asked, his tone sharp. The man hesitated, his fingers twitching toward one of the sacks. "It's this one," he said reluctantly, nudging a sack forward. He said he needed something special for a big occasion. "This blend is my most popular. I've never had complaints before." Idris untied the sack, leaning closer to examine the contents. The mix looked ordinary enough, a blend of ground leaves and seeds. But something about the smell made his stomach twist. He tied the sack back up and stood, towering over the spice seller. "Where do you get your ingredients?" Idris demanded. "You said farmers and traders. Be specific. Who did you get these from?" The spice seller's eyes darted around, avoiding Idris's gaze. "I buy from different people," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes at the main market, sometimes from traders who pass through. I don't always know their names." "That's not good enough," Idris said, his voice rising. "Someone got sick because of this. You have to know more than that." "I don't know," the man snapped, his voice trembling. "I just buy the ingredients and mix them. That's all. I've been doing this for years without any problems. Why would I poison anyone? What would I gain from that?" Idris took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe you didn't know, but something in this mix is dangerous. If you're not telling me everything, more people could get hurt. Is that what you want?" The spice seller threw up his hands, shaking his head furiously. No, I swear. I don't want anyone to get hurt. He trailed off, his gaze dropping to the ground. "There was one trader," he said quietly. He sold me some new seeds a few weeks ago. Said they were rare, that they would make my blend special. I've only used them in a few mixes. That's all I know." "Who was this trader?" Idris pressed. The man shrugged helplessly. "I don't know his name. He was not from around here," spoke with an accent. "He said he'd be passing through again soon, but I haven't seen him since." Idris's frustration bubbled to the surface. "You don't know his name, where he's from, or when he'll be back?" "That's not helpful." The spice seller's face crumpled. "I'm telling you everything I know. Please, I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to sell good spices." Idris stared at him for a long moment, his mind racing. The information was frustratingly incomplete, but it was a lead. He tied the sack of spices back up and slipped it into his satchel. "If you think of anything else," Idris said, his voice cold, "you better let me know. If more people get hurt because of this, it's on you." The spice seller nodded quickly, his face pale. I'll think. I'll try to remember more." Idris didn't respond. He turned and walked away, weaving through the crowded market with the sack of spices weighing heavily in his bag. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he was getting closer, and he wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. Back at the compound, Kahind was still bent over the pot of rice, her gloves smeared with the grains and spices she had been sifting through. Mama Halima hovered nearby, her worry etched deeply into her face. "Anything?" Mama Halima asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kahind shook her head. "Nothing obvious," she said, "but I've separated some of the spices. If there's something dangerous in here, it's likely in the mix that was added." Mama Halima sighed heavily, sinking into a nearby chair. "How did we get here?" she murmured. "A simple meal to honor my husband." And now her voice broke, and she pressed a hand to her mouth, holding back tears. Kahind placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out, Mama Halima. Idris is out there searching for answers, and we're doing what we can here. We'll get to the bottom of it. As if on cue, Idris entered the compound, his face set in a grim expression. Mama Halima stood quickly, her eyes searching his face for any sign of good news. "Did you find him?" she asked. Idris nodded. "I found him." He admitted to selling Wasiu the spice mix, but he claims he didn't know anything was wrong with it. He said he bought some new seeds from a trader a few weeks ago. That might be the source of the problem. Kahine's brow furrowed. Did he say what kind of seeds? Or who the trader was? No, Idris said, frustration creeping into his voice. He didn't know the trader's name or where he's from. He said the trader would be passing through again. But he doesn't know when. Mama Halima's shoulders sagged. "So we're back to waiting," she said softly. "Not entirely," Idris said, pulling the sack of spices from his bag. "I brought this back. It's the mix Wasiu used. If there's something dangerous in it, we might be able to find it." Kahine took the sack, her face serious. "I'll need to compare it to what's in the pot. It might take some time, but it's a start." Idris nodded. "Do whatever you need to. We need answers as soon as possible." As Kahine set to work, Mama Halima turned to Idris. "Thank you, my son," she said quietly. "You've done so much already. I just hope this nightmare ends soon." Idris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It will, Mama. We'll get through this. Together." But even as he said the words, a knot of uncertainty tightened in his chest. The pieces of the puzzle were slowly coming together, but the picture they formed was far from clear. And the more he uncovered, the more he feared what the final truth might reveal. The air in the compound was thick with tension. The entire household seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for Kahine to finish her work. Idris sat on a bench near the kitchen, his elbows resting on his knees and his head in his hands. Mama Halima paced back and forth, her slippers making soft scuffing noises on the ground. Ahmed stood leaning against a wall, arms crossed, his face twisted in frustration. "How long is this going to take?" Ahmed asked, breaking the silence. "We've been sitting here for hours." "It takes time," Idris said, lifting his head to glare at his brother. "Unless you've got a faster solution, maybe keep quiet." Ahmed pushed off the wall, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Acting like you're the only one trying to help. What exactly have you solved, Idris? You've been running around the market all day, and what do we have? A sack of spices and more questions." Idris stood, his posture tense. "At least I'm doing something. All you've done is complain and throw insults. If you care so much, Ahmed, why don't you take the lead?" "Because this whole thing is pointless," Ahmed shot back. "Whoever did this is long gone. We're wasting time playing detectives when we should be focusing on keeping this family together." "Enough!" Mama Halima's voice cut through their argument like a knife. She stopped pacing and turned to face them, her expression stern. "I've had enough of this fighting. Your father's memory deserves better than this. If you can't work together, then don't speak at all." Both brothers fell silent, their faces taut with unresolved tension. Idris sat back down, his jaw clenched, while Ahmed turned away, muttering under his breath. Kahine stepped out of the kitchen, pulling off her gloves and wiping her brow. The sight of her immediately drew everyone's attention. Mama Halima rushed over, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kahine hesitated, her eyes scanning the faces around her. "There's definitely something off with the spice mix," she said carefully. "It's not something I've seen before, but it's strong, almost overpowering. It's possible there's a toxic substance in it." Mama Halima's face paled. "Toxic? You mean it could kill someone?" Kahine nodded slowly. "If consumed in large amounts, yes. Even a small amount could make someone very sick, depending on their body's reaction." Idris stood, his fists clenched at his sides. "So it was the spice seller. He must have known something was wrong with the mix." "Not necessarily," Kahine said. "He might not have known. If he bought the ingredients from someone else, he could be just as clueless as Wasiu. But there's no way to confirm that unless we find the source of these ingredients." "This is madness," Ahmed muttered, shaking his head. We're chasing shadows. We're chasing the truth, Idris snapped. And if you're too scared to face it, then stay out of the way. Before Ahmed could respond, a commotion at the gate drew everyone's attention. A group of young men entered, dragging Wasiu between them. He stumbled as they pushed him forward, his face pale and sweaty. The fear in his eyes was unmistakable. We found him sneaking around the edge of the village, one of the men said. Looked like he was trying to run. Mama Halima stepped forward, her expression a mix of anger and disappointment. Wasiu, she said, her voice low and steady. Is it true? Were you trying to leave? Wasiu fell to his knees, shaking his head wildly. No, Mama Halima. I swear, I wasn't running. I was scared. Everyone's looking at me like I'm guilty, but I didn't do anything wrong. I swear I didn't know the spice was bad. Idris stepped closer, his eyes cold. If you didn't know, then why were you trying to leave? Wasiu looked up at him, tears streaming down his face. Because I don't know what to do. This is all too much. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted to help make the food special for Al-Haji's burial. Then tell us everything you know, Idris said, his voice hard. No more lies, Wasiu. If you leave anything out, you'll only make things worse for yourself. Wasiu nodded frantically. I've told you everything. The spice seller gave me the mix. He said it was safe, that it would make the food taste amazing. I didn't think to question it. Why would I? He's been selling spices in the market for years. And you never thought to ask where he got his ingredients? Ahmed interjected, his tone sharp. No, Wasiu admitted, his voice breaking. I didn't think anything would go wrong. Please, you have to believe me. Mama Halima sighed deeply, rubbing her temples. This is a mess, she said quietly. A terrible, terrible mess. Kahin stepped forward, her expression serious. We can't keep going in circles, she said. If the spice mix is toxic, it needs to be tested properly. We need someone with the right equipment. Until then, the pot of rice and the spices should be locked away where no one can touch them. Idris nodded. Agreed. And Wasiu stays here until we figure out what's going on. If he tries to leave again, it'll only make him look guilty. I won't run, Wasiu said quickly. I promise. I'll stay. Please don't let anyone hurt me. Mama Halima looked at the young men who had brought Wasiu in. Keep an eye on him, she said firmly. No one touches him, but make sure he doesn't go anywhere. The men nodded, pulling Wasiu to his feet and leading him to a shaded corner of the compound. He sat down heavily, his head in his hands. Idris turned to Kahin. Do you know where we can get the spices tested? Kahin thought for a moment before nodding. There's a lab in the city. It's not far, but we'll need to be careful transporting the samples. If anything spills, it could be dangerous. I'll take it, Idris said without hesitation. Whatever it takes to get answers. Mama Halima placed a hand on his arm, her eyes filled with worry. Be careful, my son. This has already cost us so much. I can't bear to lose you too. Idris nodded, his expression determined. I'll be fine, Mama. Promise. As the sun began to set, the compound settled into an uneasy quiet. The truth was still out there, waiting to be uncovered. And as Idris prepared for his journey, he knew the stakes had never been higher. The sky was still dark when Idris left the compound, carrying the sack of spices in a carefully sealed container. Kahin had packed it securely, warning him again to handle it with care. Mama Halima stood at the gate, her hands clasped tightly in prayer as she watched her son leave. Ahmed lingered nearby, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. You don't have to do this alone, Ahmed said as Idris adjusted the strap of his satchel. Idris turned to him, his face calm but determined. You've made it clear how you feel about all this. I'll manage, Ahmed sighed, stepping closer. Look, I still think this is a wild goose chase, but if you're set on it, at least let me come with you. 2 heads are better than 1, right? Idris raised an eyebrow, surprised by his brother's offer. For a moment he considered saying no, but then he nodded. Fine, let's go. Mama Halima gave a relieved smile, though her worry was still plain on her face. Be safe, both of you. and bring back the truth. The road to the city was long and bumpy. The brothers traveled in silence for much of the way, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on them. It wasn't until they were halfway there that Ahmed finally broke the silence. "You think the lab will find something?" he asked, his tone hesitant. Idris glanced at him. "I hope so. If there's something dangerous in the spices, we need to know. People could have died, Ahmed. We can't just let this go." Ahmed leaned back, staring out at the passing fields. "You always were the one chasing answers. Even when we were kids, you couldn't leave a mystery alone." Idris chuckled softly. "And you always avoided them. Someone had to keep things balanced." Ahmed smirked, but the tension between them lingered, unspoken but heavy. The road stretched on, and the city's outline gradually came into view. The lab was located in a small building on the outskirts of the city. Kahind had called ahead, and a technician was waiting for them when they arrived. The man, wearing a crisp white coat, greeted them with a serious expression. "You're the ones Kahind spoke about?" he asked. Idris nodded. "Yes, we brought the spices she mentioned. We need to know if there's anything harmful in them." The technician gestured for them to follow him inside. The room was filled with equipment that hummed quietly, the air cool and sterile. Idris handed over the container, watching closely as the technician opened it and examined the contents. "This might take a few hours," the technician said. "You can wait here or come back later." Idris and Ahmed exchanged a glance. "We'll wait," Idris said firmly. The hours dragged by, each minute feeling like an eternity. Ahmed paced the small waiting area, muttering under his breath, while Idris sat still, his eyes fixed on the door to the lab. Finally, the technician returned, holding a clipboard and looking grave. "We found something," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Idris and Ahmed stood immediately, their hearts pounding. "What is it?" Idris asked. The technician held up a small vial containing a fine powder. "There's a toxic compound in the spice mix. It's a naturally occurring substance, but in high concentrations it can be deadly. It's possible that whoever prepared this mix didn't realize how dangerous it was." Ahmed's face paled. "Deadly? So it wasn't deliberate?" The technician shrugged. "It's hard to say, but this compound isn't something you'd find in regular spices. It's rare and usually used in very small amounts, if at all. Whoever added it either didn't know what they were doing or had very bad intentions." Idris's mind raced. Could it have come from the seeds the spice seller mentioned? He said he bought some new ingredients from a trader. "That's possible," the technician said. "If the seeds were contaminated, it could explain how this compound ended up in the mix. You'd need to trace it back to the source to be sure." Ahmed shook his head. "This is getting more complicated by the minute. How are we supposed to track down some random trader?" Idris's jaw tightened. "We'll figure it out. We have to." The journey back to the village was silent, both brothers lost in thought. When they arrived, the compound was quiet, the weight of the past few days evident on everyone's faces. Mama Halima rushed out to meet them, her eyes searching their faces for answers. "What did you find?" she asked urgently. Idris took a deep breath. "There's a toxic compound in the spices. It's possible the spice seller didn't know, but it's also possible someone tampered with the ingredients. We need to find the trader who sold him the seeds." Mama Halima's hands flew to her mouth. "This is worse than I thought. Who would do such a thing?" "That's what we need to find out," Idris said. "But first, we need to warn the village. If anyone else bought spices from this seller, they could be at risk." Ahmed nodded. "For once, we agree. This is bigger than just our family. Everyone needs to know." By evening, the village gathered in the central square, the news spreading quickly. Idris stood in front of the crowd, his voice steady as he explained what they had discovered. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, fear and anger mixing in equal measure. "We don't know if this was an accident or deliberate," Idris said, "but we need to be cautious. If anyone here bought spices from the market recently, don't use them until we've had them tested." An elder stepped forward, his face lined with concern. "What about the trader? Can he be found?" "We're working on it," Idris said. "If anyone knows anything about a new trader selling seeds or spices, Please come forward. As the crowd dispersed, Mama Halima placed a hand on Idris's shoulder. You've done well, my son. Your father would be proud. Idris smiled faintly, but the weight of the mystery still pressed heavily on him. The truth was out there, but finding it would take everything they had. And as the stars began to appear in the night sky, he vowed to see it through, no matter what.